Welcome back to Founders Lab Live. So far, you have identified a real problem in block one and validated your idea in block two. That's a great job. Now it's time to answer the big question. Okay, can this idea actually become a sustainable business? Right? So that's exactly what we are going to do in block three using one of the world's most popular startup tools called the Lean Canvas. So don't worry if you have never heard it before. By the end of the session, you will have a complete one-page business model uh, covering your solution, your customer, your problem, your revenue model, costs, and much more. We will also use AI to sharpen your thinking, improve your unique value proposition, and challenge all the assumptions along the way. So grab your notebook or laptop and open your startup idea and let's transform your idea into a business model that is clear, structured, and ready for the next stage of your entrepreneurial journey. So from validated idea to a business model, this is what we are going to actually jump into. But before we even do that, let's take a moment to see how far you have already come. One of the biggest mistakes first time entrepreneurs make is thinking that startups begin with building an app or launching a website. But in reality, it's not the case. Successful startups follow a journey, and even every stage, if you look at, actually builds on the previous one. And that's exactly what we have been doing in Founders Lab Live. Okay. For example, in block one, you became a problem solver. So instead of asking a question, what business should I start? You learned to ask, what meaningful problem exists around me? Using design thinking, particularly the empathize and define stages, right, introduced by the Stanford D School, you observed people understood their frustrations. You actually used a lot of tools such as the 5 whys and converted vague observations into clear problem statements. Remember, great startups don't begin with technology. In fact, they begin with empathy. And then we did block two. Once you had identified a meaningful problem, you explored multiple solutions instead of falling in love with your first idea. This reflects an important principle of design thinking called ideation. Rather than assuming your first solution is the best one, you generated multiple ideas, shortlisted the strongest one, validated it, studied competitors, and build your value proposition canvas. The value proposition canvas developed by Dr. Alexander Osterwalder helped you answer three important questions. What jobs is my customer trying to accomplish? What pains are they experiencing? Uh, what gains are they looking for? Only after understanding those questions did you design a solution that truly creates value. That process dramatically increases the chances of building something customers actually want. Today's block, which is block number three, is where your startup starts looking like a real business. Until now, you've answered the questions like what problem am I solving? Who is my customer? Why would they choose my solution? Those are essential questions. But investors, mentors, and even customers will eventually ask more. For example, how will you reach your customers? How will you make money? What will it cost to run the business? How will you measure your success? What makes your startup difficult to copy? These questions don't test your idea, they test your business model. And that's exactly what the Lean Canvas helps us build. Imagine you're constructing a house. In block one, you selected the land. In block two, you decided what kind of house you wanted to build and confirmed that people actually needed it. Now in block three, you're creating the architectural blueprint. You decide where every room goes, where the doors will be, where electricity and plumbing will run. Without a blueprint, construction becomes confusing and expensive. Similarly, without a business model, startups often waste time and money building products that are not sustainable. So the lean canvas gives your startup that blueprint. By the end of this session, you will have something incredibly valuable. Not just an idea, not just a customer profile, not just a value proposition. You will have a complete one-page business model. It will include all 9 lean canvas blocks, a clearly defined revenue model, a refined unique value proposition, and a business model that is ready for the next stage. That is building your MVP, minimum viable product. So remember, every successful startup, from Airbnb and Dropbox to Razorpay and Zerodha, began with a business model that evolved over time. Your lean canvas won't be perfect today, and that's perfectly fine. It's not meant to be, actually. It is your first version, a living document that will improve as you learn more about your customers and your market. So let's begin building the blueprint of your startup. Now, before we start filling the 9 blocks, let's answer a very simple question. Why do startups use something called a lean canvas instead of writing a 40-page business plan? Imagine you have an amazing startup idea. You meet an investor in an elevator, or perhaps a teacher asks you to explain your business in just 2 minutes. You don't have time to open a huge document. You need a simple way to explain your entire business. That's exactly why Lean Canvas exists. So the Lean Canvas was created in 2010 by Ash Maurya, who is an entrepreneur and author of the book Running Lean. Ash adapted another famous framework called the Business Model Canvas, which was developed earlier by Alexander Osterwalder and Yves Pineur. Yes, I pronounce it correctly. Yves Pineur, Yves Pineur. Okay, so Yves Pineur. While the business model canvas works well for established businesses, Ash Maurya redesigned it specifically for startups where many assumptions are still untested, right? Now, here's a very important point, right? Your lean canvas is not actually a report card. It's not a final business plan. You can think of it as your first map. When you're traveling to a new city, you may not know every road. You begin with a map, and as you travel, you discover shortcuts, traffic, and better routes. You update your journey. A startup works the same way. Every box you write in the lean canvas is actually a hypothesis, or in simple words, an educated guess. For example, you might believe that students are willing to pay 299 rupees every month for an app. But is that really true? You won't know until you actually talk to customers and test it. That is why startups build, test, learn, and improve continuously. This idea comes from another famous startup approach called the Lean Startup Method, introduced by Eric Ries in his best selling book, The Lean Startup. His philosophy is very simple: don't spend years building something nobody wants. Build quickly, learn from real customers, and improve continuously. Now, let's look at another important point on this slide. The lean canvas fits on just one page, an A4 size sheet of paper, or maybe you can take an A3 size. Right. Some people think one page means less information. Actually, it's possible. When you're forced to write the only one page, you have to think much more clearly and precisely, right? Very aptly to the point what is really required and important. If you cannot explain your business simply, you probably don't understand it well enough yourself. Albert Einstein is often credited with saying, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Whether or not those words, exact words, in fact, are his. The idea perfectly captures why startup founders love the lean canvas. There's another advantage, okay, and that is it is fast to build. Instead of spending weeks writing a business plan, you first lean canvas, do lean canvas, right? And and you can do it actually in 20 minutes. That's what Ash Maurya says, and it's in fact right as well. Okay, that doesn't mean it has to be perfect. It simply means you have captured your current thinking. You will improve it as you learn more. And finally, let's look at the 9 building blocks. Together, these 9 questions describe almost every important part of your startup. Okay, and I'll start with the first question. What problem are you solving? What exactly has that problem, right? To do with the person who is actually dealing with the problem. Why should they choose you? What solution will you build? How will customers find you? How will you make money? Right? How will it cost to run the business? In fact, how much will it cost to run the business? How will you measure success? And finally, what makes your startup difficult to copy? So these are the 9 blocks we'll complete together during the session. Notice something else on the slide at the bottom. If you see, we're not filling them randomly. We will follow a recommended order, but the choice is all yours, right? Beginning with the problem. Then we'll move on to doing the customer segments, then your unique value proposition, followed by your solution, channels, revenue streams, cost structure, key metrics, and finally your unfair advantage. This order helps you build your business logically, one step at a time, instead of jumping around. By the end of this block, you will have something many first time founders never create: a complete structured business model that clearly explains how your startup creates value and how it can become a sustainable business. At this point, I would like to, you know, draw your attention towards one very important question. In fact, what is a business model, right? So, a business model, in fact, is a process through which any business creates value, captures value, and delivers value. These are 3 important phrases, by the way. Okay. So let's begin with the first 4 building blocks of the lean canvas. Okay. These are the most important building blocks because they answer one fundamental question. Are you solving the right problem for the right people? Yes. If you have to glue into one question, are you solving the right problem for the right people? If you get these 4 blocks right, the remaining 5 become much easier. So let's explore each one of them one by one. Our first block is problem. Every successful startup begins with a problem, and of course, not with an idea, because idea is synonymous to your solution. Many first time entrepreneurs make the mistake of saying, I have an app idea. Experienced founders ask a very different question: what painful problem am I solving? Notice the word painful. People don't pay for products because they're interesting. They pay because those products solve an important problem, right? For example, imagine you're building an app for students preparing for JEE, right? A very tough exam, maybe. A weak problem statement would say students find studying difficult, right? Something like that. That's too actually broad. Almost every student studies. A stronger problem statement would be students preparing for JEE struggle to identify their weak topics quickly and don't know what to revise every day. That's much more specific, right? Another example, instead of saying people waste food, you can actually say college students living in hostels often throw away leftover food because there is no quick way to share it with nearby students. By the way, when I'm saying this, I'm not alleging anybody, right? It's just a general example that I'm giving, but it actually sometimes happens. You are you want to actually give a feed, but then you find there's nobody. Whom do you give? You're not left with any choice. So there has to be a way. Now see the difference. Specific problems lead to better solutions. The slide also recommends listing only one to two, three, to three problems, right? One, two, three. And the reason is very simple, because if you're trying to solve 10 problems at once, you're probably solving none of them well. So prioritize your problems. Very important, trivial, common to all your personas, all your customers, prospective clients, right, who are facing that, and that you try to do. Okay. So, as startup advisor Paul Graham, who is also the co-founder of Y Combinator, uh, those of you do not know what Y Combinator is, it's world's one of the largest, accelerators. Right. So it's in Stanford University. You can actually just go and check. Often emphasizes great startups usually start by solving one meaningful problem extremely well, rather than many problems poorly. You'll also notice an AI prompt here using ChatGPT. And because it's excellent actually in brainstorming, organizing information, and expanding ideas. So instead of asking, give me startup ideas, the prompt asks a very specific thing, right? To identify three most painful aspects of your customer's problem. And that's much better prompt because it pushes the AI to think deeply rather than broadly. Block number two is customer segments. So you now know the problem, right? The next question is who is facing the problem? Okay. So one of the biggest mistakes student founders make is saying everyone faces or all students. Come on, don't use this. This is not the reality. If your customer is everyone, your customer is probably no one. So successful startups begin with a small group of people, or maybe they focus a niche crowd, right? Who deliberately need the solution. Now, this group is called your early adopters. Okay, early adopters. Yes. So according to Everett Rogers, a diffusion of innovations theory, every new product is first adopted by a small group of enthusiastic users before it reaches the mass market. So early adopters are people who are really enthusiastic. By the way, there's a number also that various surveys say, and the number is 13.5% of your early users for the first 3 years are your early adopters. Okay, right. So these early adopters are willing to try something new. They want to give you feedback and even forgive imperfections because the problem matters so much to them. Think about Instagram for a moment. Okay, it first attracted a small, you can say, community of people who loved sharing beautiful mobile photos. Only later did it become one of the world's biggest social media, platforms. So instead of writing students, write something like, class 11 or 12 science students, maybe in tier 2 Indian cities preparing for JEE, using YouTube for study. Be that precise, right? And when you're being precise, it's not an assumption that you're taking. It's actually you should go and validate it, whether this is happening for them or not, right? So notice how much clearer that actually becomes. And Gemini is recommended here because it performs very well, when creating detailed customer profiles or describing the behaviors, interests, and demographics. It helps you actually understand not just who your customer is, but how they think and behave. Okay, so we are moving to the block number three, which is unique value proposition, right? Now comes one of the most important thing, right? Just ask a simple question. Why should someone choose your startup instead of every other alternative, right? So I didn't say the name of a competitor because your biggest competition isn't always another startup. Sometimes it's doing nothing. When you're doing nothing, that itself is a competition because somebody else is doing something and making money out of it, creating some problem, creating some solution. Okay, so there could be another example. Sometimes it's using WhatsApp. So use a WhatsApp and try to solve the problem. Sometimes use Excel. Now, why am you giving you these? These are already available. These are there on your phone, very easy. And in fact, they don't cost you, right? It can also be any old way. So what is a good UVP, unique value proposition? It's actually short, clear, specific. It's benefit focused, right? And this slide gives you a very useful formula. And I'll give you the formula. You don't have to buy hard, but over time, you will be able to, remember. So use a verb, okay, plus what you do, plus for whom, plus there is a phrase called so they can achieve an outcome, because end of the day, whatever you're doing, it has to achieve some outcome. Let's take an example. Help. So verb is help. So whatever you have built, that's okay, whether it's an app, website, product, anything. Help school students, so at least school students, discover scholarship opportunities so that they can apply before deadlines without missing important updates. Think about it. Let me use another example. Connect local farmers directly with restaurants so they can sell fresh produce without middlemen. You understood the rhythm. So there's a verb, there's what you want to do, and for whom, and then there's a phrase called so they can achieve an outcome. Right? So these statements focus on benefits and they don't focus on features. So customers don't buy features, they buy outcomes. This idea is strongly supported by Theodore Levitt. He's a famous Harvard Business School professor who said people don't want a quarter-inch drill. I repeat, people don't want a quarter-inch drill. They want a quarter-inch hole. You understood the difference. So people want that hole. People don't want a square, inch drill. So there's a hole, right? And you have a square inch. You see whether it's going to fit or not. Let's think about it. So in other words, customers buy the result. They don't buy the tool. That's why Claude is used maybe here, right? Claude is particularly strong at improving your writing, removing ambiguity, and making messages more persuasive. It acts like an editor for your startup's promise to customers. We'll move to the fourth block, which is the solution. Now, right, but let me tell you, right, something which is very important. The solution actually comes after the problem, okay, and it does not come before the problem. So many founders build products first and then search for customers. Agreed? Successful founders do the opposite one. They deeply understand the customer first and then design the simplest solution possible. Simplest solution. The slide asks you to list your top three features. And then you may ask why top three? Because startups don't need hundreds of features. They need the fewest features necessary to solve the customer's biggest problem. So this idea comes from the concept of minimum viable product, or MVP, introduced by Eric Ries. An MVP isn't a low quality product. It's the simplest version of a product that delivers value and allows you to learn from your real customers by taking feedback. For example, if you're building a tutoring platform, don't start by creating live classes, quizzes, AI tutors, certificates, discussion forums, games, mobile apps. Okay. Start with the one feature that solves the biggest pain. Perhaps that's simply matching students with the right tutor in under 2 minutes. Everything else can come later. The AI prompt asks Claude to identify which features are essential and which are merely nice to have. That's exactly how experienced product managers think. Before adding a feature, they ask, does this help solve the customer's biggest problem? And if the answer is flat no, it can probably wait. So these four blocks answer the most important questions for any startup. Okay, what problem exists? Who has the problem? Why should they choose you? What is the simplest solution that solves it? Get these four blocks right, and you will have built the strongest foundation for the rest of your lean canvas. So let's move on to the remaining five blocks where we'll explore customers, money, growth, and what makes your startup difficult to copy. Excellent. You have now built the foundation of your startup by defining the problem, customer segment, unique value proposition, and solution. Now let's answer another important question. How does this startup become a real business? A great idea is only the beginning. Every startup, every successful startup, in fact, also needs customers, revenue, a way to measure success, and something that makes it difficult for others to copy. Let's explore the remaining five blocks. We'll start with block number five, which is channels. Imagine you have built the world's best product, but nobody knows whether it exists, where it exists. Will your startup succeed? Probably not. In fact, not. That's why every startup needs channels. Channels simply answer one question: how will customers discover, buy, and use your product? Think about your own life. How do you discover new restaurants? Maybe through Instagram, maybe through Google Maps, maybe your friends. Those are channels. If you're building an app for school students, your channels might be school clubs, WhatsApp groups, Instagram reels, YouTube shorts, teacher recommendations. If you're building software for schools, your channel probably isn't Instagram. It could be school principals, education conferences, or direct email. The important point is this: don't choose channels because they're popular, choose them because your customers are already there. Notice the AI prompt asks Gemini to recommend free or low cost channels. That's intentional. Most student founders don't have huge marketing budgets. So before spending money, learn to grow using smart low cost strategies. Many successful startups, including Airbnb, Dropbox, in their early days, they relied heavily on creative low cost customer acquisition before investing significantly in advertising. Then comes block 6, revenue streams. Okay, let's answer a quick question every investor eventually asks: how will this startup make money? Many young founders say, we'll figure that out later, that's risky, you know, all that. But if you look at a business creates value, but it must also capture value. In other words, people should be willing to pay for the value you create. The slide suggests starting with one revenue model. Why only one? Because simplicity helps you test your business faster. So here are a few examples. A learning app may charge a monthly subscription. Amazon earns money through marketplace commissions. Canva follows a freemium model where basic features are free, but advanced features require payment. A clothing brand may use a direct to consumer model, selling directly through its own website. A company selling software to schools might choose a B2B, which is business to business subscription model. Notice something else. The slide also asks you to think about your price point. Pricing isn't random. A common mistake is choosing a price simply because it feels right. Instead, ask these questions: what value am I creating? What are customers already paying today? Is my price affordable for my target customer? The AI prompt asks Claude to compare different revenue models and recommend one based on your customer and the Indian market. Claude is particularly useful here because it can evaluate trade offs and explain why one option may fit better than another. Let's move to the other block, which is cost structure. Okay, now this particular block will ask a very simple question: what will it cost to run your startup? Many first time founders only think about profits. Experienced founders first understand costs. For example, your startup may need website hosting, AI tools, marketing, packaging, transportation, team. So, obviously, you'll have to give team salaries, then office expenses, and maybe a lot of miscellaneous expenditure. Okay. So, even if you're a student working from home, right, there are still costs. Knowing your major expenses helps answer another important question, and that's: when will my business even break even, right, or achieve break even? So, what is break even? So, this one term, break hyphen even. Break even means the point where your revenue becomes equal to your costs. So it's like a no loss, no profit situation. Okay. And after that, you begin making profit. The AI prompt helps estimate realistic startup costs instead of guessing. That's a valuable exercise because investors appreciate founders who understand both opportunity and financial discipline. Then comes block 8, which is key metrics. Imagine you're playing cricket. How do you know whether you're playing well? You look at the scoreboard. A startup also needs a scoreboard. Those numbers are called key metrics, but not every number is useful. For example, if your app has 100,000 downloads, but only 50 people use it every week, downloads don't tell the real story. Instead, you might track daily active users, weekly retention, customer satisfaction, monthly revenue, customer acquisition cost. Huge phrases, but don't worry. Now, this slide reminds us to choose actionable metrics. That means numbers you can actually influence through better decisions. This idea aligns with the concept of actionable metrics discussed by Eric Ries in the Lean Startup. He wants founders not to rely on vanity metrics. And vanity metrics are, in fact, numbers that look impressive but don't help improve business. Okay. And those are generally ballpark or some kind of, assumed numbers. Let's take an example 1 million website visitors. That sounds exciting, right? But if nobody buys your product, that number doesn't match much. Okay. In fact, it's wrong to say. The AI prompt helps identify the three most important metrics to monitor during the first 90 days of your startup. Then comes block 9 here, which is unfair advantage, right? And this is where finally we reach one of the most important and misunderstood blocks if you actually look at, okay? That is the unfair advantage. So you can ask yourself, if someone with money, more money in fact, copied my startup tomorrow, why would customers still choose me? So many founders write, we are passionate, we work hard. Those are all good, right? Wonderful qualities. But they are not unfair advantages. What your customer looks for is the customer wants their problem to be solved, right? And if they're getting a similar thing from some other, right, maybe at a different price or they derive more value, they will definitely go there. Okay. So an unfair advantage is something that competitors cannot easily copy or cannot easily buy. Okay. For example, maybe your team already has access to thousands of teachers. Think in that manner. Okay. Maybe you're solving a problem you have personally experienced for years. Okay. Maybe you have built relationships with local schools. Maybe you have collected unique data that nobody else has. Those are much stronger advantages. Okay. You can think about Zomato. Its unfair advantage is not simply having a food delivery app. It's a huge network of restaurants, delivery partners, customer reviews, and years of operational data that would be extremely difficult or hard for a new competitor to recreate. The AI prompt actually asks anti gravity to suggest realistic unfair advantages for student founders, not generic ideas like hard work or dedication. That's exactly the mindset you should develop as an entrepreneur. Now step back and look at your lean canvas. You have answered the 9 powerful questions. First, what problem exists? Who has that problem? Why should they choose you? What solution will you build? How will customers find you? How will you make money? What will it cost? How will you measure success? What makes your startup difficult to copy? Together, all these 9 blocks transform a simple idea into a structured business model. So, in the next slide, we will look at a complete Indian startup example to see how all these blocks come together in practice. Right. So this is how we will expect you to design your lean canvas. Right. So, so we have learned all these individually. Now let us look at together, okay, how all these blocks fit together in actually a real startup. Uh, you will see that the lean canvas of a fictional, let's say, Indian startup, let's name it as Skill Bridge. Okay, although it's it's created for learning purposes, the business model is realistic and reflects the challenges faced by thousands of engineering students across India. Okay, so the startup idea is very simple. Skillbridge wants to solve a very common problem. Many final year engineering students graduate with good marks, but very little practical experience. At the same time, startups struggle to hire students because they don't know whether the students actually have the required skills. So, Skillbridge acts as a bridge between these two groups by connecting students with verified, micro internship subjects. Let's see how this idea is captured in the lean canvas. We'll start with the first, that is problem. If you may recall that recommended steps to follow. We'll start with problem first, right? And here you will notice that the startup doesn't list 10 different problems. It just focuses on three important problems. The first one is, and you can read them bullets. Startups lack work experience. Sorry, students lack real work experience. Companies cannot verify practical skills. That's one. Paid internships are scarce in many tier two cities, well enough to craft a problem. Now, these are all related problems affecting the same customer. So, this is exactly what we focused earlier. Focus creates clarity. Now, instead of solving everything, solve one important problem exceptionally well. Now, we'll move to the last box that you see on the right hand side, that is the customer segments. Okay. Notice how specific they are. The primary customer is not simply engineering students, instead, it's final year engineering or BTech students studying in tier 2 colleges. The startup also identifies another customer segment, right? Early stage startups looking for project based talent. And finally, it identifies an early adopter, right? In fact, early adopter is a part of this entire lean canvas. So in the nine boxes that we actually learned, some boxes, right, do have their precise or their derivatives. For example, in case of problems, you will always have alternatives. So it's always better to have how it is being solved currently. In case of customer segment, you have something called early adopter. Okay. In case of unique value proposition, there's something called high level concept, which we will actually discuss. Right. Okay. So the question is, let me discuss this problem. A computer science student, maybe from Nagpur, who has never had an internship. Why is this useful? Because products are easier to design when you imagine one specific customer instead of millions of people. Now, many successful companies even create customer personas. These are, in fact, fictional profiles representing their ideal customer. For example, let's say you take one customer, the name is Meet Rahul, his name is Rahul, and then he's 21 years old, is preparing for placements. He also is very good with coding, but no internship experience. Now, every product decision becomes easier because the team keeps asking, would Rahul find this useful? And it's very easy, we can relate very easily to human beings and their stories. And that's why it's very relevant. Once we have done the customer segment, we'll move to the unique value proposition. Just look at uh, the middle box. In fact, here is something that I want to tell you. We learned something called value proposition canvas. Okay, so Alexander Osterwalder, right, when he created the business model canvas, right, he actually looked at the entire thing very carefully, and it found there were two important things. One is the problem, and then the one is the value proposition, and then there were customers. He brought those two and brought them together. So you may recall how the value proposition canvas actually looks like. Also, what Ash Maurya did, he looked at the business model canvas, perhaps, and he actually changed the value proposition into something called unique value proposition. I'll tell you why. Because for a startup, it's very important to have credibility. So your value proposition has to be definitely unique so that you can be part of this whole race. Otherwise, you'll be lost. Okay. So therefore, the word unique is really important. Okay. So let's read this first. Get your first real project done in 30 days and a verified proof of work that companies trust. Look at the entire phrasing. Right. So this is a strong UVP because it answers three important questions. First of all, who is it for? Obviously, students seeking work experience. What's the benefit? Complete a real project. And what's the outcome? Gain verified proof that employers trust. So notice what the sentence doesn't say. It doesn't talk about AI. It doesn't mention any technology or any features or something. Instead, focuses entirely on the value delivered to the customer. Okay, that's what making a strong UVP. Right, it's very important. Take the next one, that is solution. Uh, Now the startup explains how it will solve the problem. Instead of adding, dozens of features, it includes only three: a marketplace for verified projects, skill based matching instead of resume based matching, a digital proof of work certificate. Now notice something interesting. Each feature directly solves one of the earlier problems. This is excellent product thinking. Every feature should have a reason to exist. If a feature doesn't solve a customer problem, ask yourself whether you really need it. The next channel is, how will customers discover the platform? Instead of writing social media, simply write, the startup becomes specific. It mentions LinkedIn, student communities, it mentions college placement cells, it mentions Instagram reels, then WhatsApp groups for startup founders. If you look at all these, this is much stronger than just saying we'll market on social media. Good founders know exactly where their first customers already spent time. Let's look at the sixth one, that is revenue streams. Okay. Interestingly, students don't pay anything. Okay. Instead, startups pay to post projects. Students can optionally subscribe to premium profiles. The startup even sets a measurable revenue target. Now, notice this important point. Different customers can pay in different ways. Sometimes the user and the paying customer are not the same person. Google search is free for users. Advertisers pay Google. Similarly, SkillBridge allows students to use the platform while earning revenue from employers and premium services. Okay. Now, you will notice the final three blocks, that is cost structure, key metrics, and unfair advantage, they're intentionally left incomplete. Okay. Yeah. Why? Because this is a classroom exercise, in fact, or you're watching this and working in groups, you can do that. Your task is actually to think like founders and complete these remaining sections yourself using everything you have learned so far. Okay. You may see that while there are some numbers or something already mentioned, but they are not very clear and articulate. Okay. But I'll tell you, AI can assist you, examples can inspire you, but the business model uh, should ultimately reflect your own startup idea. So, this example shows something very important, that a startup is not just an app or a product, it's a complete system. And every block connects with the others. So, if you change your customer, your solution may change. If your solution actually changes, your revenue model might also change. If your revenue changes, your costs and your metrics will change too. And that's why the lean canvas is so powerful. It helps you see what your startup, or like one connected business rather than nine independent boxes. Okay, so it's your turn now, and start building your own lean canvas. Okay, so please follow the previous template that I actually gave you. Okay, and yeah, this is the order. But you can do in silos and put them together. That's up to you. So therefore, you may look. Okay. So remember one thing. There's an entrepreneur. His name is Steve Blank, right? He often says, no business plan survives first contact with customers. No business plan survives first contact with customers. In simple words, it's like no startup gets everything right on the first attempt. And that's perfectly fine. Your goal today is not at all perfection, it's about clarity. That's exactly why this slide says no block should be left empty. Perfection is not the goal, clarity is. So imagine you're writing the first draft of an essay, and do you expect it to be perfect? Of course not. You'll have to edit it, improve it, rewrite parts of it. And then your lean canvas works exactly the same way. Okay. So today is your first version. As you interview customers, build your MVP, receive feedback, learn more, you can always come back and change. And professional startups update their lean canvas many times. In fact, changing your canvas after learning something new is a sign that you're learning and you're not failing. Follow the order, right? That's very important. And always start with a problem. Okay, perfect. So we'll move to the next one. But before that, there is also a final thought that comes on my mind. You should not compare your lean canvas with somebody else's, because every startup begins very differently. Some startups start with one customer, some may begin with one school, some neighborhood. All that is fine. Focus on building a business model that makes sense for your idea. That is very important. So I will suggest that you pause this video for the next 30 minutes, right? And do all this, put them together, create your lean canvas. Okay. So you have built a strong business model. It's time to answer one of the most important questions every founder, investor, and customer, in fact, eventually asks. How will this startup make money? A startup that solves a problem is wonderful, but a startup that solves a problem and generates sustainable revenue has the potential to survive and grow. And revenue is the fuel that keeps your startup moving. Without that fuel, even the best ideas eventually run out of energy. So, this slide introduces 5 of the most common revenue models built by startups. And there's no best model. The right choice actually depends on what you're building, who your customers are, how they prefer to pay. So let's understand each one with real examples. First, we'll start with the subscription model. A subscription means customers pay you regularly, usually every month or every year, in exchange for continued access to your product or service. Think about Netflix, Spotify, ChatGPT Plus. As long as customers keep finding value, they continue paying. So, what's the biggest advantage? Predictable income. If 500 customers pay every month, you can estimate your future revenue more confidently. But there's also a challenge. Every month, customers ask themselves, is this still worth paying for? And if the answer becomes no, they cancel the subscription. That's called customer churn, the rate at which you lose your customers. So which means customers stop using paying for your service. And so subscription businesses must keep delivering value consistently. If you're building an AI learning platform or productivity app, a subscription model could work well because customers receive ongoing value. Then comes marketplace, right? So a marketplace doesn't usually create the product itself. Instead, it connects two groups. For example, buyers and sellers, students and tutors, freelancers and companies. Companies like Urban Company, Uber, Airbnb. These are all marketplaces. If you look at their job is to make it easy for two sides to find each other. The business earns money by taking a commission from each successful transaction. Imagine you create a platform where local artists sell handmade products. You don't actually manufacture the products. You simply connect artists with customers and earn a small percentage whenever a sale happens. Marketplace businesses can become very large because they don't need to own all the products themselves. And then we use aggregator models and all in this. However, there are also difficult to start, right? For example, um, it's very common, like you need both buyers and sellers. If there are no sellers, customers won't come. If there are no customers, sellers won't join. So this challenge is known as the chicken and egg problem, a common concept in platform businesses. Solving it is the one of the best challenges for companies like Uber, Airbnb, and many other marketplaces. The third one is the freemium model. The word freemium actually combines two words, free plus premium. So the basic version of your product is available free of cost. People can use it immediately. Then if you want additional features, they upgrade to a paid version. Think about Canva, Notion, and Spotify, sorry. Right. You can use them for free. Premium features require actually payment. Why does this particular model work? Because once people begin using a product, they experience its value. Some users eventually decide the premium features are worth paying for. The biggest advantage is that it's easier to attract new users because there's no payment barrier. The challenge is that only a small percentage of users usually upgrade. So, industry studies often show conversion rates of only a few percent, which is why companies using this model need a large user base to generate significant revenue. Then comes D2C, which is quite common, direct to customer or direct to consumer, you can say. So instead of selling through distributors or retailers, you sell directly to your customers. Brands like Boat, Mama Earth, they all started by building strong direct relationships with customers through their own websites and digital marketing. Imagine you're selling eco-friendly notebooks designed by students. Instead of supplying them to shops first, you sell them directly through your own website or Instagram page. Biggest advantage here is you control your brand, customer experience, and customer data. But the challenge is you're also responsible for marketing, delivery, customer support, and logistics. Running a D2C business means wearing many hats. Then comes the B2B, which is business to business. Now, instead of selling to individual customers, your customers are organizations, uh, schools, maybe colleges, hospitals, companies. You can think about Zoho, Freshdesk, Razorpay, right? These businesses create software that helps other businesses operate more efficiently. So B2B businesses often create, in fact, they charge high prices because organizations usually purchase for many employees rather than just one individual. But selling to businesses usually takes longer. You may need meetings, demonstrations, approvals, negotiations before closing a sale, right? And this is known as long sales cycle. When I say closing a sale, I actually mean that you have sold it. That's what it is. Okay, so long sales cycle. So the reward is often larger contracts and longer, strong customer relationships. Which model should you choose is the question. Can I combine multiple revenue models? Maybe if you're a first time founder, you may ask this question. The answer is absolutely. Many successful startups too. For example, YouTube earns advertising revenue, subscription revenue through YouTube Premium and other businesses. But notice what this slide recommends. Start with just one because startups succeed by reducing complexity, right? If you're still validating your idea, adding too many pricing models creates confusion. You should master one model first and then you can expand later. So before moving to the next slide, ask yourself these three questions. Who receives the value? Who is willing to pay for that value? Why would they choose to pay instead of paying a free alternative? If you can answer these three questions clearly, you're already thinking like an entrepreneur. In the next slide, we will look at another critical part of lean canvas, and that's a unique value proposition. It's it's often called a single most important sentence in your entire business model because it explains why customers should choose you over other options. Okay, so we have already introduced the value proposition, unique value proposition, right? And when we actually discuss the lean canvas, but if there's one block that deserves extra attention, right, uh, it's often the very first thing a customer sees. What a customer sees, it could be a headline on your website, it could be the first line of your app, it could be the opening sentence of your pitch, whatever, or even the answer you give with when someone asks, so what does your startup do? That's a question. And here's the reality. The research by Nielsen Norman Group, a globally researched, respected, user experience research. I've very often used, given as reference in my earlier blogs. Okay, it shows that visitors decide within just a few seconds whether to stay on a web page or leave it. Okay, if your message is not clear immediately, many people simply move on. That's why your first sentence matters so much. So what exactly is a UVP? A unique value proposition is a short statement that clearly explains what you do, who you do it for, then why you're different, and what outcome your customer gets. Notice something really important. A UVP is not actually a slogan. It's not a tagline. You should understand, right? Nike's famous, line. Okay, just do it. That's a tagline. It inspires people, but it doesn't explain what Nike actually sells. So if UVP does, your UVP should be like, why should I choose your startup instead of every other option? If this is a question that the UVP should immediately answer. And simple formula I already gave you about this: verb plus what you do plus for a specific customer plus so they can achieve an outcome, right? So instead of saying we provide coding education, you can say learn coding through fun, project based lessons designed for students, school students, so they can build real apps before graduation. So notice how much stronger that feels. It's very clear, it's specific. Okay, so that's very important. There are some couple of examples that I've mentioned. For example, if you look at the first example, we help students get better at their studies. Is it wrong completely? Not really. But it's so broad that almost every education company should say the same, right? Who are these students? School students, college students, medical students? You should know. Okay. Example number two, if you look at, is we help engineering students find internships faster. Okay. Now we are getting somewhere. The customer is much clearer, benefit is clearer, but still missing something. Why should I choose your platform instead of another internship website? The differentiation is not obvious yet. Look at the third one where you see a tick mark. Get your first verified project from a real startup in 30 days, even if you are from a tier 2 college with no connections. Now that's powerful. You can break it down. Who is it for? Students from tier 2 colleges. What's the outcome? It's a real project. How quickly? Within 30 days. Why is it different? It specifically addresses students who don't have strong professional networks. One sentence, yet it answers almost every important customer question. This is what a strong UVP does. Okay. So here's a principle that every entrepreneur should remember. People don't buy products, they buy better versions of themselves. Harvard University, business school, in fact, Professor Theodore Levitt famously explained that people don't uh, want to buy a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole. Think about it. Nobody wants a fitness app because they love exercise tracking. They buy it because they want to become healthier. Nobody wants a food delivery app because they enjoy clicking the buttons. They want because they're hungry and they want food. End of the day, if that food, and in very less time, good food from their favorite restaurant comes, that is very important. Why Claude? That's very important because that's what we have mentioned, because it's a smart choice, right? Writing is difficult, Even experienced founders rewrite their UVPs, many times. Claude acts like an editor. It'll ask you questions like, is your message specific? Is the benefit obvious? Does it sound different from competitors? Could a 12-year-old understand it? All that. Okay. But you should remember that AI shouldn't write your startup's promise. It should help you improve your thinking. The best founders use AI to sharpen ideas and not to replace them. Okay. So before even you move to the next slide, I think you should test your UVP. Read it aloud to a friend or a family member. Ask some questions like, can you tell me what my startup does? Can you tell me who is this for? Can you tell me why it's different? And if they hesitate or seem confused, don't worry. You can rewrite it always. Great founders don't usually write a brilliant UVP on the first attempt. They improve it through feedback. That's exactly what entrepreneurship is all about. Okay, let's move to the next slide. Now, throughout this course, you've probably noticed something. We are not just learning entrepreneurship, we are learning actually AI powered entrepreneurship, right? And today's founders have an advantage. The entrepreneurs don't have even 5 years ago. Imagine if Steve Jobs, Narayan Murthy, Kunal Shah, Melanie Perkins, had an AI assistant 24 available 24 hours a day. Would they still do all the research themselves? Probably not. They would ask AI to help them think faster, research deeper, challenge assumptions, and generate alternatives. That's exactly how you should use AI. Notice I said help you think, not think for you. Okay, AI is your co-founder, mentor, and research assistant. It should never become your replacement. Okay, suppose you have completed your customer research and know your startup idea. Instead of staring at one blank, wondering where to begin, you can actually go and ask ChatGPT to generate the first draft of your lean canvas. Okay, and it doesn't simply say create a business model. Instead, it clearly says, if you look at the prompt, startup name, problem, customer, India as market, and everything, all nine. So this is an example of good prompt engineering. Okay, the better your instructions, the better your results. Think of AI like a new intern. If you give vague instructions, you'll probably get vague work, right? If you provide clear instructions, in fact, uh, context, expectations, the quality improves dramatically. You should also remember one important thing. This is only a starting point. So don't copy paste the output. Read it, challenge it, improve it to your own. If you look at the Claude, right, we have already discussed UVP. Writing one is difficult, improving one is even harder. That's where Claude shines. Instead of asking Claude to write your UVP from scratch, what the prompt, just paste that prompt, okay? Because this is going to ask you some very simple question. Is it clear, specific, different from other competitors also? And this is a powerful way to use AI. Okay, professionals, writers, designers, startup founders, all seek feedback before publishing anything important. Okay, you use Claude for a revenue model as advisor. Okay, one of the hardest decisions for any startup is choosing how to make money. Okay, should you charge a subscription, premium, marketplace? Right. Instead of guessing, this prompt asks Claude to compare multiple options. Notice another important, interesting detail. That's the prompt specifically mentions given my customers' willingness to pay in India. So why is that important? Because pricing depends heavily on your market. A price that works in the US may not work in India. Likewise, pricing for school students is very different from pricing for businesses. Good entrepreneurs always consider the customer's purchasing power before deciding on a pricing, strategy. Okay, we learned that channels, answer the question, where will my customers find me? So Gemini is particularly useful for exploring customer behavior and discovering marketing channels. Notice the prompt doesn't ask how do I market my startup. Instead, it actually asks what are the top three low cost channels for reaching this specific customer in India. Now, that's much smarter. If your customers are school teachers, your strategy will be very different from someone selling gaming apps to teenagers. Always make your prompts as specific as possible. Specific questions produce specific answers. Vague questions often produce, generic answers. Now, suppose your startup is an app or a website. Where do you actually begin? Front end, back end, database, hosting, authentication? Most students don't know these terms yet. That's perfectly fine again. This prompt asks Codex to recommend a complete technology stack using free or affordable tools suitable for student founders. So, a tech stack simply means the collection of technologies used to build a software. Think of it like building a house. You need bricks, cement, steel, plumbing, electricity, etc. Similarly, software requires different technologies working together. The important part here is that you don't need extensive software or expensive software knowledge to actually start building. Most successful startups began using free or open source technologies before they grew into large companies. Finally, we have something called anti gravity. One of the hardest lean canvas blocks is unfair advantage. As you know, many founders actually struggle because they think only large companies have competitive advantages, but that's not true. Student founders can also have unique strengths. Maybe you understand your classmates better than any company. Maybe you have access to your school community. Maybe probably personally experienced the problem you're solving. So anti-gravity will actually help you brainstorm realistic advantages based on your specific startup, instead of giving generic answers like work hard or be passionate. Please note that Codex and anti-gravity are essentially the tools that actually help you build your entire website, platform, any. So there's a bonus video that I actually added using uh, anti-gravity previously. You can have a look and understand that. So one final principle as we finish this entire session, I want to leave you with one very important idea. The quality of AI's answers depends heavily on the quality of your questions. The idea is often summarized in the phrase garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you give AI poor instructions, you will usually receive poor results. So don't use AI to avoid thinking, use it to think better. Okay, let's move to the next. Yes. Now, before we wrap up this entire block, let's talk about something extremely important. Now, after mentoring many startups across India, right, one interesting pattern that has actually emerged. Most startup failures don't happen because people lack passion. They happen because founders make avoidable mistakes while thinking about their business, right? So, what's the good news? If you know these mistakes in advance, you can avoid them. So, let's look at some of the common mistakes. The first one, imagine someone asks you, what does your startup do? And you reply, we help people live better lives. It sounds nice, but what does it actually mean? Who are these people? How are their lives becoming better? Okay, why should anyone believe you? A statement that's so broad that it could actually describe almost any company is not useful. Instead, ask yourself three simple questions: who exactly the customer is, what specific outcome do they get, how quickly or how differently do I help them achieve it. Let's improve the example. Instead of we help people live better lives, say we help class 10 students improve their mathematics scores by by in fact providing personalized practice sessions based on their weak topics in just 15 minutes a day. Now your customer is clear. Okay. So remember, clarity brings creativity. Mistake number two essentially is we'll figure out, revenue later. So many first time founders get excited about building products, very few get excited about discussing money. So when someone asks, how will your startup earn revenue? They often reply, we'll show advertisements or we'll figure out later. That's not a business model. That's a hope. Imagine opening a restaurant without deciding whether customers will pay for meals. It wouldn't work. The slide gives you a brilliant question to ask yourself. If I launch tomorrow with my first 100 users, how would I earn my first 1000 rupees? Notice how practical that question is. It forces you to think about real customers, real payments, and real value. A startup doesn't become successful because people use it. It becomes sustainable when customers are willing to pay for the value it creates. Now, mistake three is trying to solve too many problems. Sometimes students write things like my app solve education, healthcare, pollution, climate change, unemployment, mental health, traffic. Now, that sounds ambitious, but it's almost impossible to execute. So, great startups usually begin by solving one important problem extremely well. Let's think about Google. Today, it offers Gmail, Maps, Drive, YouTube, Android, and much more. But when Google started in 1998, it focused on one thing: helping people search the internet better. Everything else came later. Your lean canvas asks for a maximum of three problems. That's not a limitation, it's a strength. Focusing on fewer problems helps you build a better solution. Now, always ask yourself, which problem hurts my customer the most? You should start here. Mistake number four is thinking passion is an unfair advantage. But here is the question: is passion important? The answer is yes, absolutely. But it's an unfair advantage? No. Why? Because your competitors can also be equally passionate or, in fact, more passionate. Okay. So the slide gives you a fantastic challenge. Imagine a team from IIT or any well funded startup launches the same idea tomorrow. Why would customers still choose you? Now you're thinking about real competitive advantage. Perhaps you already have strong relationships with schools. Maybe you've spent, understanding a particular community, or you've collected unique data. You're solving a problem you're personally experienced. So those are much stronger unfair advantages than simply saying we work hard. So every entrepreneur should ask an important question: what do we have that money doesn't or almost cannot buy? Mistake number five is choosing vague marketing channels. Many lean canvases contain answers like social media, word of mouth, but that's not specific enough. Imagine someone asks, where exactly will you find your first customer? Can you answer that question? And the slide challenges you to go deeper instead of writing Instagram, or ask yourself, right? So think in this manner: which Instagram page, which creator, which community? Don't say WhatsApp. You can ask a simple thing: which group? Who is already inside that group? Because successful marketing begins with specificity. Okay. Now, the last mistake is tracking vanity metrics. Finally, it is very important. We will talk about numbers. Many startups proudly announce we have 100,000 downloads. As I mentioned earlier, it sounds impressive, but here's a better question: how many actually use the product every week? How many paying customers do you have? Now, those are far more meaningful questions. Already, I referenced, Eric Ries right. So what he said in his book, The Lean Startup, right, he distinguishes between vanity metrics and actionable metrics. So your actionable metrics will help you make better decisions. Now the slide suggests you asking, what's the one number that if it improves, almost everything else improves too? Now, this idea is closely related to what many companies call the North Star metric. Now, this is one single measurement that best reflects the value customers receive from your product. Take the example of Spotify. It might be listening time, For Facebook, it could be watch time. For your startup, it might be active users, successful transactions, or customer retention. So, one final thought: if you made one or more of these mistakes while filling your lean canvas, all you have to do is, right, this is absolutely normal. Every successful founder has rewritten their business model multiple times. So you should stay curious, seek feedback. Okay. And remember one thing: entrepreneurship isn't about getting everything right on the first day. Right. It's all about learning faster than everyone else. Okay. Wish you all the best. And we're going to wrap up this soon. I'll say congratulations. You've completed one of the most important milestones in your entrepreneurial journey. Right. It's all about business model. Okay. Uh, the output that you would have got is what problem you're solving, who your customer is, what solution you're building, which metrics will tell you whether you're succeeding, right? And if you haven't got this, okay, right, then you should actually do it. But if you have, you will now feel that you have actually just moved beyond just having an idea. Okay. Now, before moving ahead, it's very important that you should take a look at certain check boxes here. First one is, have you filled all 9 lean boxes? Second, is your UVP one clear sentence, right? I mean, can a 12-year-old understand it? Then the third one is, have you chosen a revenue model and a price point? Okay, you have to be very specific here. Then next one is, are your key metrics actionable? Okay. And the last one is your unfair advantage real? Don't write passion, hard work, determination. Just ask a question to yourself: what do we have that another startup can't easily copy? Right? Because entrepreneurship is all about an ongoing journey, right? Every customer interview, every experiment, every success, every failure, right, will actually help you something new. Okay, so coming up next is actually about uh, uh, you know uh, very simple thing that uh, now you have to build your startup identity, a recognizable logo, a compelling tagline, maybe a great business deserves a memorable name, all that. And that's where we call it as block 4, that is brand and identity. Okay, wish you all the best and see you in block 4. Thank you.